Health Live, your favorite public health podcast. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and audio on your favorite podcast platforms. If you're interested in public health, then this is the space for you. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to True Health Live. I'm Deidre Sully. I'm here today. This is just an audio, but you'll definitely be able to catch this on YouTube as well as LinkedIn and Facebook as well. It'll just be a slideshow, but that's okay. So today we're talking about stress in public health. You know, why stress? I originally wanted to talk about water, right? You know, there's definitely a water shortage and a water crisis, and talk about how that affects the public health, especially how it also shows up on the social justice scene and why it's caused so many health disparities, right? But we just had this strong or weak, words have power, so we say strong here. So this strong, we had a day that comes every year. This was the midterm elections, right? So I thought, like, you know, how stressed out is everybody? Very, I would imagine. You know, that in some places they're still counting. Everybody's kind of like nail biting, and it's always a, you know, November. That Tuesday, right, in November is always it's always a nail biter. No, it can always be pretty stressful for people, and on different spectrums, depending on, you know, how close you are to that type of movement, you know, especially when it comes to policy and advocacy, or just how closely you follow, you know, because not everybody, we know voting is a thing in this country, and, you know, some people vote, some people don't, to each his own. But the point is, it could be a very stressful time of year. So it just made more sense to discuss stress, right? And how that affects the public health. Because there are a lot of things happening, especially since we are, I know some people post pandemic, right? Um, we've had things added on to the list of why we're stressed over these last couple of years. So it just made sense to talk about it. And I think I've done it before on one of my other channels, not necessarily the podcast, but it definitely, the issue of stress has definitely come up with me and the ladies before. But it's okay to, like, you know, recap and kind of go over why we have to remember these things so we can stay healthy, right? Because the whole point of True Health Live is to, you know, have conversations about why we need to be healthy, and the talk about the things that we need to be aware of that make us unhealthy, or things that are threats to our health. So stress is stress management. Um, like a third of people here, at least in the US, report being stressed. 33% of the US population, 33% of all people surveyed. And, you know, of course, in research, every person represents a group of people. So, for example, like, I think I did a survey, we did a survey when I was still doing work with, like, the tobacco group. We did a survey of about 1,000 people, and we did like some personal interviews, and every one person represented about like 300 to 400 people. So, you know, when we think of games like Family Feud, and like survey says, right? So surveys are important. You know, that can also be you know, a point of stress, like the information that we get from surveys, or, you know, even the fact that surveys can be skewed. You know, we'll definitely touch on that. I want to make sure that I'm being, you know, open about things. Sometimes they can be skewed, or how they're interpreted can be, you know, sometimes off. And many times it may not even be how it's interpreted. It's just like, who was a part of the survey. We know this is a big issue. You know, that goes into the diversity, equity, and inclusion field, and health, you know, health equity. You know, who's included in studies and surveys. You know, there's definitely an imbalance when it comes to people of color being included in some of these things. So it's like, do we have an accurate view of how many people are actually stressed? And I wonder, you know, if this survey, you know, is one of those surveys that are inaccurately balanced because it doesn't include enough people of color. The amount of people who are stressed could probably be way more than 33%. But we'll go with 33% because that's the information that's published. That's what we have, and we can't necessarily go off of a guess. Um, but you and I know between us, it's most likely more. Um, but anyway, even still, a third of the population is entirely too much. And most of the studies say that the most stressed out age group is 18 to 33, and that's a wide range. It's a really wide range that includes um at least two generations, right? And if we even go by like who's more stressed, um I think Gen Z is at the top of the list, and they're the young ones, right? Then there's the millennials, and millennials can be funny. Like depending on if you're, there's a lot of millennials who are like cusp babies. So depending on where you fall, like you could be a millennial or you could be Gen X or Gen Y. Sorry, we don't really talk about Gen Y all the time. But Gen Z, then millennials, then Gen X, then baby boomers. It's like the older you get, like the less you have to be concerned about. But it doesn't mean that maybe the stress isn't there as much, but you may be dealing with, for those baby boomers and Gen Xers and older adults, they could be dealing with the after effects of a lifetime of stress, right? So maybe the external stressors are not there anymore, but it doesn't mean that they're not dealing with the fallout from stress. And what are some of those things? You know, Common triggers can be, let's go from the let's go by the age range, right? So like those younger people in the spectrum, schoolwork, social anxiety, and the social anxiety and social issues and all that, that can actually, that we can put that over the entire range. What Deciding what to do for college, if they want to go to college, how are they going to make a living, how are they going to move up out of mom and dad's house, they have those types of things. Definitely schoolwork, which I find interesting because maybe it's, I was talking to a community member, a younger community member, a baby. He was 8 years old. I'm like, do you have any homework? And he's like, no. I'm like, they don't give homework anymore. This shows how old I am. And he's like, no. And then another individual we were walking with said, I think they only give homework if there's a struggle. And I'm just like, well, when do they start to get homework? Maybe that's it. Maybe they have to like be um uh prepped for having homework, and then it won't be such a surprise when they get older. I wonder if that's part of it. But needless to say, they definitely are stressed about schoolwork. And then we get a little older, those social anxieties and social stresses are still there. How you move and make friends with people. And again, some of that is because everything is online. And I know many people have said this before me. People don't meet people the same way anymore. They don't make friends anymore. There's not necessarily that physical organic exchange. And this is pre-pandemic. This goes with everything being digital. People meeting people online, having whole relationships um online. So then when there has to be like a genuine interaction, like physical real life interaction with people, there's not a real understanding or know-how to do it. So that can be stressful for people. It can be stressful for people to have to move around digitally for everything and not necessarily get the ins and outs and the who's and the whys and the whats. So there's all these things that are all over the place that are stressing us out. So then again, like, so what's the fallout from that? Heart disease, um, high blood pressure, all those things that also come from what we talk about all the time, like even the way we eat, what goes into our bodies. So the same thing is can be said about stress, like what external triggers are or stressors are creating these external things that we then now ingest, and they become problems that manifest or diseases that manifest within our body. High blood sugar. You can get sick. You can even come down with a cold, flu, sleep dysfunction, depression, like all of those things. And the interesting thing about just even getting like physically sick, like with like a cold, because it's like, well, how can a cold how can stress give you a cold? Isn't it a virus? Like, don't you have to catch it from something? Yeah, but when you are constantly in stress mode, which a lot of people are, your body goes into a perpetual fight or flight. That's stress. And so when your body's there, it starts to no longer really um the signals don't click anymore. So if you're always there, your signal of okay, the stressor is gone may not go off. So your switch is always on. And so if your switch is always on, the body's going to drain energy from other places to keep that switch on. And so then that means your immune system is weakened. So then yeah, you'll catch a cold, you'll get the flu. You might get, sick from other things. So I'll just leave it at that. The immune system is more than just like, taking vitamin C and ingesting physical things. It also, comes from a mental and spiritual place as well, right? Or it is connected to your mental and spiritual and how healthy those planes are as well. What are some of the things that stress us out the most? I did mention like, okay, well, this week it's like there's elections, health care, child care. What are we doing with our relationships, our friendships, our family and relative relationships, our marriages, all of those things. The biggest thing, finances, and finances cuts across all those areas. Finances can destroy, or not properly managing finances. Let's put it that way, because finances don't just manage themselves. Not properly managing finances can destroy relationships. Especially if there's not accountability, or education or knowledge of how to manage finances. The frustrations can get high, and then things can break. So finances, that is the most, it's listed as like the number one reason or number one cause of stress problems. So interestingly enough, you know, that age group 18 to 33, we know a lot of Gen Zers, like they're quote unquote influencers and making their money, making their bones off of the internet. They're getting paid, as they say, they're getting the bag, right? And also, as we're talking about bags, make sure you go over to Anu Life Global Ministries and catch the latest midday affirmation. We have so many. We do them every Sunday at 12 p.m. And the latest one, we're talking about what's in your bag and really talking about whether we carry, what we carry in our bags or our purse, what we carry every day. And if it's something that it has purpose, or you're just carrying around a lot of baggage. And that baggage can be stress, what emotional stress, or stress that's manifesting from old things that no longer have a purpose that we're carrying with us. So that's stress as well. So it's all related, is my point. So yeah, finances are the number one cause. That also can overarch that age. It's definitely interwoven through that age group of 18 to 33. Makes sense. 18-year-old, everybody's working and doing something to hustle nowadays. And on that hustle is always about like, how are you going to get the bag or make that money? And that's where finances pop up. The most, I don't know if it's the most stressed out age, because it's by age groups, so Gen Z is at the top. But by age 36 is when people, start reporting they feel most stressed out. So it's like the most stressed out age, I guess. Like, and so if we're talking about like by groups, yeah, by groups, Gen Z, the millennials, and so on down the line. But then when it comes to like the age that people feel most stressed out, apparently is the age of 36. And I'm like, I thought that was interesting, because if you're into numerology, the 36 can be, kind of whittled down, not kind of, but it whittles down to the number nine. And in some systems, like for example, when it comes to supreme mathematics, the nine is related to birth, and not just any birth, but like a second birth. So the first birth is your physical birth, and that second birth is your rebirth, your spiritual rebirth. So I thought that was interesting. Like, if that's the age that people report feeling most stressed, it's like, I wonder if it's, and then there's the, the idea of like midlife crisis, right? And that's, getting younger and younger. But I wondered, I'm like, well, this would be like a tipping point where if there was like a change of mindset or a stepping back to look at ourselves like objectively to move into a certain place so that we're not stressed anymore. And that could be, that rebirth that you have. So I just thought that was interesting, something interesting to share. So if you're into numerology, definitely go look up some of that information because that can be something that pulls you away, right? Something interesting to pull you away from your everyday stressors and take your mind off of those external triggers. And also definitely take a look at look up supreme mathematics to get a little bit more of a understanding about what it means and what it is. You could definitely also follow Anu Life Global Ministries on Instagram, Anu Life GM. They definitely do. We do a mathematics question every day, so you can join in the conversation and get a little bit more information about that. So, yeah, finances is what causes the most stress. The most stressed out age group is Gen Z. The range of the most stress is 18 to 33, but people report at 36 being the most stressed out. So that's where we are when it comes to stress. I wanted to share a little bit of a story when it comes to the younger generation. We'll go back to the Gen Z. So recently, I did a Red Wrap event. So Red Wrap is an initiative of Anu Life Global Ministries, which is my community, and we did an event in Brooklyn, and we had some young girls stop by. They were on the higher end of the age range, like teenagers, and we were talking about periods and menses, and they were like, I'm so stressed out. And I'm just like, I'm thinking like, you're so young. What do you have to be stressed out at? Which was rude of me because it's like, no, they have stressors too. And as we're speaking, like it made me think like to add to the list of like conditions linked to stress when it comes to women, what does it do to our womb? You know? What are they holding in their wombs? How are their menses um reflections of the type of stress that they're holding. So all of these things are related and interwoven and connected, to how important it is to really take a step back and think about how we can reduce external triggers of stress. One of the main things about stress is like I don't want to say like confusing, but like the mixing up of like that and anxiety. And I was definitely guilty of that as well. They're different. They're absolutely related, but they're different. There's a fine line between them, right? So like stress is usually like caused by external triggers, and they can be short term or long term. We went over some of them, finances, elections, family problems, relationship problems, children, marriage, uh, and it could be a range of things. Even when the symptoms of stress manifest, that can become like a circular event. Like, okay, so now I'm having womb issues, and so now I'm stressed out about how I can correct it or make it stop. So can become like this circular event. And so what happens is it can be physical or mental, but then they're usually the stress is tied, like I said, to external events. And once that external event stops, the stress is supposed to stop. But what usually happens and what happens with a lot of people is that there remains like this persistent or excessive worry. And that part is the anxiety, right? So the stress can be like the mental or physical reactions that we have to an external trigger, but the anxiety is more like long term and persistent even after those triggers are gone. So it's almost like the anxiety comes, because you're still in that fight or flight mode. Remember, if you're constantly in that fight or flight mode, then other things start to happen. You can get sick in many different ways, not just a cold. The body can start to break down. Um, yeah, anxiety can be in the absence of a stressor and leads to, nearly, like I said, identical issues, sleep disruption, womb care issues, cold, flu, Um, even issues with the brain, right? Because if you're in that fight or flight, like I said, the body will drain power from elsewhere. So, what does it do to um, our cognitive abilities? And so, as I'm sitting here thinking, like, everybody's stressed out, myself included. Like, even like thinking about, okay, what am I going to talk about? When is the podcast going to get out? Like, sometimes those are stressors. And then I have to think, like, how much of the stress is self-induced? So that's really key. How much of our stress that we take on are things that are self-induced because we have to, really take a step back or be accountable for some of the things that we do and say and think. So I want to make sure, like, that being said, some of it is self-caused, and the jury can be out on how much of that is, everybody's different, but how much of it, how much are we doing to ourselves, how much of it is self-inflicted, um as one would say. But what are so the key part here is, like, what are some tangible steps we can take to reduce some of that stress? So, well, one big one, the first one that I have on my list, and I made like a list of like just four like little things that we can just do like easily, um, is to find community. One of the last shows that I did was talking about like the importance of community and public health, and really thinking about what the reality of what community is. And so it's not just like, oh, the people I live around, because it's like, well, do you even know the people that you live around? And if you do, great. If you like them, even better. But many people are in areas where they don't necessarily know everybody around them, and nor do they like them, and they may not even want to get to know them. Let's just be real. So it's like, be in a space where you can be around people that you really enjoy, right? And that you where you can where there's trust, and there's reciprocity and a connection, and because you're sharing, culture and morals and values. So I think that's the first one. And we may not all, because like I said, finances is a big one. So, like, are we all going to be able to get up and jump up and move? Probably not. But there's also something called the internet. And there's a lot of places that, are both digital and in person, and you can find your ALIKes, you can find your community, and use that as like a first step for reducing the stress in your life, right? The second thing on my list is, like, do something creative. I like to bead. Do I bead all the time? No. Should I? Yes. Do I need to organize myself a little bit more so that I can, bead often and bead more often and create more often? Absolutely. Because that's a space where I can go where I don't have to think about anything else except for how pretty I want something to come out, or how technical I want to be in the creation of it, really thinking about how I want it to look, who I'm going to give it to, if I'm going to give it to someone, or am I just making things just to make them? Just put yourself in a space where you can be creative. And that creativity is whatever you want it to be. If it's, writing, if it's doing, creating jewelry, if it's, you're an artist, you draw, or you make music, like whatever that is, if you're a dancer, make time for those creative spaces. And there's an awesome podcast about that, um, from Chief Yuya, where he's talking about creativity and spirituality. You can find that on chiefyuya.com. And I'll put some of these links and whatnot in the description boxes when the video comes out. So for those of you who are listening on the podcast, you can definitely head over to True Health Live on YouTube. So www.youtube.com/True Health Live, because we got a name now. YouTube has made some changes. And you can just kind of click over in the description box, and for any of the links that I'm sharing on today's show. What else? So we got find community, do something creative, exercise. We always need that. And again, like, everybody can't exercise to the same level. So even if it's like you go for a 10 to 15-minute walk every day, you get outside, get some fresh air. And I know it's difficult for some of us who are in areas that do experience the seasons. So right now it's pretty cold in some places. Um, So if you have like where you can walk around the house, even if it's the perimeter of the house, get outside. Even if it's just to sit on the porch, get outside. Um, Walk around. If you're going to sit on the porch, you can do something where you do arm exercises or sitting leg exercises. Is our, like I said, our level of exercise is going to be different, but you have to get moving, because that blood circulation is key and important, especially if you are in that space where you're, dealing with anxiety and can fall into a state of depression. That movement is definitely helpful. And then the final thing, is it the final thing? I think so. Talk to someone. I want to make sure I say that again. Talk to someone. A lot of the times, and I have been guilty of this, we think I'll just handle it myself, or I don't want to burden anybody, or I can deal with it. That may not be the case, because if you could deal with it, you wouldn't be sitting there in that space already. It is okay to not be okay. And so it's okay to talk to someone. Having like constant stress or constant anxiety is a part of mental and behavioral health. And so we want to make sure that we are healthy in that space. This is why talking about stress and stressors is important. It affects the public health because it is a part of our mental health and well-being. So we want to make sure that that's a lower part of what's going on with us. We don't want to have a lot of stress so that we slip into having mental and behavioral health issues or disorders, excuse me. So that we're the healthiest that we can be. So talking to someone, and when I say talking to someone, I'm not saying like go talk to your cousin or your friend or whatever. Those are really good. But if you're in that space where it needs to be someone who is a professional, then you can find that. And it doesn't necessarily, and when I say professional, I'm not saying someone who has like, PhD after their name necessarily, because it can be whoever your spiritual counselor is. If it is your prerogative to go to church, it can be whoever your spiritual leader, your teacher, your chief, your jegna. That's who you can go speak to, because they, are usually trained in those areas. Most likely they should be. So you can definitely go that route and talk to someone who will be able to help you through those. And sometimes if it needs to be a team, so meaning like more than one, then so be it. Then so be it. And the reason why I'm saying, it doesn't necessarily have to be a PhD, because again, finances. Everybody's not in this at the same level where they can afford everything. So I want to make sure I'm being um, as broad as possible to give folks options of what to use. So if you are just a regular person listening to this, it's like, well, I can't afford that. I want to make sure you're hearing something you can afford. If you are someone who is in the public health field, and maybe you have clients or maybe you have friends, um, these are things that you can share with them. True Health Live is about helping everybody, with different steps and tangible things that we can do when it comes to addressing a particular issue. So what were our four? They were: find community, do something creative, exercise, even if it's 10 to 15-minute walk every day, and then talk to someone or get a counselor. So those are some tangible things that you can do right now, today, before the sun sets. If you're in if you're across the globe, the sun's probably already setting by the time you listen to this, by the time this comes out, because I'm going to release this at about 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it is going to be dark, but when you're listening to this, if it's daylight, you can do some of those things before the sun sets, wherever you are and whenever you are. Take this recording back, rewind it, and listen to those 4 steps over and over and over again. And we'll definitely do more shows on stress and like other things. I'll have someone on to talk about like, their story and what they've done to, release stress. So you can hear like um, someone who, can actually speak to what they may have been successful at, because everything doesn't have to be like my story. So absolutely. So definitely, if this podcast has helped you in any way, we were talking about stress, like with regards to like the information of the stats or the statistics shared, and then the tangible steps to deal with them, let me know if there's something that you want me to go over or talk about a little bit more. definitely call me. Let me know. The contact information is in the description box of the video, and it definitely comes on at the outro at the end. But absolutely, like stress is something I wanted to talk about, and we'll get into the issue of another stressor that some people are going through, which is, the lack of proper um, infrastructure for water for many communities in this country, and it's just happening more and more like a, I don't want to say a domino effect, but it's definitely like pinging up all over the country. And so, like, why is that happening? How is that, leading to um, the increase of health issues in certain populations? So we'll get into that next time. What I wanted to do before we go out is definitely talk to everyone or share with everyone my ebook, which I have not done in all of these. So the ebook came out in July, and we've had several podcasts since July. And I don't think that I have promoted it on the podcast once. So I'm going to use this time to talk about the ebook. You may have seen some of the commercials out about it. And if you haven't, willfully you will soon. But my ebook, 10 Points of Public Health, and stress is talked about in there because one of the 10 points talks about how, for example, housing is one of the 10 points, and how it can cause stress and constant moving and things like that. But the book is called 10 Points in Public Health, Elements and Concepts. It's my first ebook, and it is free. That's right, you heard it. It is free 99, and you can go on deidresully.com / 10 points ebook, and you can find it there, or you can just go to deidresully.com, and the first image there is going to take you right to the landing page for the ebook. But it's called 10 Points in Public Health, first ebook. And so I kept it really short. It's the 10 points told in 3 parts, and that is it's 3-4-3. That's the pattern. It's 3-4-3. Part 1 talks about the tenets of public health. And if you are a public health student or someone who is in the public health arena, you know those 3 tenets from CEA Winslow: preventing health, promoting health, and prolonging life, right? I'm not going to go too deep into them. Go get the book, download it. The second part is what I like to call, and I think I coined this because I haven't seen this anywhere else, it's the public health P's. So it's eat your P's. Public health P's. The P's is an acronym for policy, equity, advocacy, and system. So public policy, public health policy, public health equity, public health advocacy, and public health systems. And I, briefly go over what those mean and different examples of how they have been addressed. And then finally, I wanted to make sure I didn't leave this out, is part 3, the bare necessities. How do we get to the places that we are when it comes to the public's health? And it's either the presence or lack of the bare necessities: food, clothing, and shelter. And they all come together to form, where we are on the poverty spectrum, right? Or whether you experience poverty or not. And so we talk about, like, water, we talk about housing. And again, those things cause stressors. If you don't have the fundamentals, the bare necessities of what it takes to live, just the basics of what you need, stressors are going to be magnified for you. And so you're definitely going to be one of those people that are constantly experiencing anxiety, constantly experiencing, some of the diseases that manifest when it comes to prolonged stress. So yeah, those 3 parts. I'll name the 10 points. Prevention, promotion, life prolonging, policy, equity, advocacy, public health systems, housing, nutrition, and poverty. So the food, clothing, shelter translates into, how we address nutrition, how we've addressed poverty, and how we address housing for people. So those are the 10 points of public health. definitely make sure you head over to the website to get it. And I want to, make sure that everyone is getting what they need, or getting the most out of this program and out of this podcast. We always ask, like, share what you want to know more of, suggest if there's someone you want to hear on the show, because True Health Live is about getting to the core truth. So even if the topic is uncomfortable and something that has to be discussed, we're going to talk about it, even if it's unpopular. Now, we're not going to go, to do things to be quote unquote canceled, but I'm definitely going to go up to the line if I can, because there are a lot of things that do need to be talked about and do need to be revealed. I don't think public health it definitely falls on that, drama sphere, but it also then depends on what you're talking about. Last season we did a show on the vaccine, and depending on who's listening and how they felt about it, that was, pretty dicey. So we'll definitely go there. We will go there, because it's about telling the truth of certain things. So, willfully, you got a lot out of that. We talked about stress today. What are the things, the tangible steps? Find community, do something creative, exercise every day, and then talk to someone if you need to. So those are the things about, the truth in public health. I want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you check us out on whatever podcast platform you listen to, and leave a review. I want to know how the podcast is doing. So leave a review, and we will see you. Thank you for joining us here at True Health Live. Remember to like, save, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment and send an email if there's a topic if you want to discuss. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at True Health Live. You can also listen on DeirdreSully.com. If there's a topic you'd like to discuss or hear, you can send an email to truehealthlive@gmail.com. See you next time.